Hard time since I last saw you, and I've had plenty of trouble. And all because of you. Because of me? What do you mean? You remember the diamond necklace you lent me to wear to the party at the ministry? Yes, what about it? Well, I lost it. What are you talking about? You returned it to me. What I gave back to you was another one just like it, and it took us 10 years to pay for it. You can imagine it wasn't easy for us since we were quite poor. Anyway, I'm glad it's over and done with. Madame Forestier stopped short. You say you bought a diamond necklace to replace that other one? Yes. You didn't even notice then. They really were exactly alike. And she smiled, full of a proud, simple joy. Madame Forestier, profoundly moved, took Mathilde's hands in her own. Oh, my poor, poor Mathilde! Mine was false. It was worth 500 francs at the most.
Okay, so, right. We laugh because, of course, the irony is just so dark that you can't help but laugh. Let's do some quick work now with this really classic short story. I have had freshmen that say, of all the texts we study, this is the one that most sticks in the mind, maybe for any number of reasons. Let's play a game or two here. First of all, we can summarize this story at level 1 very quickly, can't we? This is a story about a woman who is middle class. She is not poor. She's middle class. She'd love to be able to be considered a little bit more upper class. She gets invited to a party. She says to her husband, I don't want to go because I'll look embarrassed with the clothes I have. I need a dress. She gets the dress. I need something to make me look even better. She gets a necklace. She goes to the party. She loses the necklace. Now the obvious question is, let's put it in our notes, why doesn't she just go to her friend and say, I lost the necklace? Of course, the irony would be that her friend would say to her, you know what, don't worry about it. It was not real diamonds. It was fake diamonds. We'll be able to get, we can figure this out. You pay me a couple of $100 and we take care of it. No, that's not what happens. Instead, they go into debt $500,000 to go out and get this necklace and then work for 10 years to try and pay off the necklace. Finally, they pay it off, but everybody's changed. He's changed. She's changed. Well, obviously, I have to ask about the significance of this change. So changed physically that the woman she borrows the necklace from doesn't even recognize her 10 years later. Whoa! In fact, did you notice the number of times that on the last page of the story, 342, the word poor keeps getting used? Oh, poor Mathilde. Poor Mathilde. No, this necklace wasn't worth $100. End of story. As a matter of fact, notice the use of the word poor in the very final lines. Oh, my poor, poor Mathilde. Mine was false, fake. It was worth 500 francs at the most. Boom. By the way, we used to do this really interesting assignment with freshmen where we would say, notice that's the end of the story. We actually had an addition to the story once where that last word, at the most, was at the bottom of the right page. And collectively, students, when they read it together with me, they would flip the page and go, what happens next? Like, what did she say? There's nothing there. One of the surprise endings of a genius like Maupassant. And so we used to ask freshmen, write the sequel to the story. Wait a minute, what? The necklace you gave to me was worth $100 and I spent $500,000 in 10 years of my life paying it back? Are you serious? Like, what do you say then? Do you ask for the other necklace? Do you yell at her? Notice she even blames Madame Forestier. She says, you're to blame. Which is going to be interesting at level 2 because we might ask the question, do you think Madame Forestier has some reason to carry some of the blame? Because, of course, she is from a different class, isn't she? She is from that upper class. Well, let's take a look now at the story itself. Let's go back through it, starting on page 3 32. I'm fascinated with the drawings that are associated in this. This is a level 3A question already. Take a look at that drawing on page 332. What do you find fascinating about that drawing as it relates to this story, right? Of course, you could have made comments about this drawing before you know the story. Now that you know the story, whole different maybe interpretation, right? The longing for sleep, the longing for maybe a daydream, that notion of always wanting something that you don't have, right? Notice the opening lines. She was one, and this is the brilliance of Maupassant. You can do this, by the way, with any one of his stories, where once you know the ending, you can go back and go, oh, he was totally setting us up. Watch the opening lines. She was, I'm reading with you on 333. She was one of those pretty, charming young women who are born as if by an error of fate into a petty official's family. And of course, if you owned your textbook here, you would circle what 2 words, or 3 words? Error of fate. Let's put it in our notes right away. Right away, this story is already being given away as this is going to be a story about an error of fate. Notice the word fate is capitalized in the typeset. Why? Because later we're going to hear the word chance, and the same game gets played again. Let's introduce it as a philosophic concept: determinism versus free will. This question is one we've already seen before in our study of Most Dangerous Game, and here it is again. The question is simple. Do you have freedom in your life to make the choices that you make? Or is everything in your life kind of scripted for you? In other words, everything was scripted that right now you would be sitting in this room listening to me talk. Or, rather, is it about a choice that you make? Well, here, notice, there's a certain kind of fate that's going to be in play. Of course, we start out with this unable to afford jewelry. She dressed simply, but she was as wretched. Whoa, poverty stinks. Now, let's put it in our notes. This is not poverty. What she thinks is poverty is, of course, not poverty. She's going to know poverty at the conclusion of 10 years, but right now she doesn't know poverty. In other words, a possible 3A observation already. We sometimes think that we are in one situation, but we're really not. We will find out what that situation is like possibly in our life. We just don't know it, right? Middle school students who talk about how unbelievably boring school is. High school students will say, dude, you've never been in high school. You have no clue. See how that one works? Notice she had no proper wardrobe. I'm on page 334. No jewels. Nothing. By the way, let's point out the word nothing, and we immediately at 3A think when we are seniors later in your career, you will think about the great Shakespearean play, King Lear, nothing comes from nothing. Or T.S. Eliot's classic poem, Wasteland, the word nothing. It's like a mantra. Point out in this story for yourself every time the word nothing gets used. And, more particularly, the moments when it does get used, right? Notice you have conflict. Let's write it down at 2B. Conflict, right away. Character versus character, it's clear right away. You have a husband who's so excited, yay, we got invited to this really nice party. The wife, really? I'm going to show up with nothing to wear. I'm going to be embarrassed by my middle class dress. I have nothing. Of course, right? We're down to bottom of page 334. I haven't a thing to wear. How could I go? Now, let's pay attention to the ways that at 3A, this story works very well with the O. Henry text, Gift of Magi. In that story, you have a husband and a wife who are more than willing to make sacrifices for each other so that the other one will be happy. Notice him here. He says it. Well, I was going to buy a rifle, but I guess I'll spend that money. I'll let you go and get your needed dress, right? But notice the exchange. He asks her, how much for an evening dress would you need? What would be a suitable one that you could wear? Now, some readers of this have pointed out, wait. Why does she have to ask him for the money to go and buy a dress for her? Now we have an understanding as well. This is a story, of course, about gender, isn't it? In other words, the man takes care of the money. The woman has to ask for the money. He will give her the money, right? Okay. And notice he kind of treats her almost childlike. Fine. Here's the money. You go and get yourself something nice. Let's point out that in some ways, of course, Madame Lois is kind of childlike in this story, isn't she? I'm not going to the party because I don't have anything to wear. Or later, I have a nice dress, but I don't have any jewelry, right? And he kind of then treats her very much like, all right, fine, almost like a father figure to a child almost, right? As, okay, fine. Notice, he never gets it. What's the matter at the bottom of 335 tells you that he doesn't really understand the complexities of his wife's conflict. We have another conflict, let's write it down. Character versus self. She's embarrassed, isn't she? I'm going to show up and people are going to make fun of me. A 3B observation. Can you remember in your life ever feeling this way? Where you felt like some other people were making fun of you because of maybe the way you dressed. I had a student once who said, had no clue about this until I hit first grade, first day of 6th grade. Went all the way through elementary school. I came from a family where we didn't have a lot. I had brothers who were older than me and sisters who were older than me, and so I just wore the hand-me-downs, right? And my sisters gave me stuff, and I wore them. I was proud to wear the clothes of my older sister. It was kind of a badge of honor. And then on the first day of 6th grade when I showed up, one of the kids in class, a girl, looked at me and said, "Oh, where did you get those clothes?" And she said, I looked down and I said, "From my older sister." And she said, for the first time in my life, it hit me that I was going to be defined by the clothes I wore. I mean, what kind of crazy world is that? Where people make decisions about who you are by the clothes that you wear, and more particularly, the amount of money you spent on those clothes. Very interesting. Here we are. We're in this world where she needs to make a show so she can hide what she really is. Of course, as any number of freshman readers of this story have pointed out, well, what's the point of making the show if that's not really who she is? You know what I'm saying? So she's going to go and hang out with all these really rich people. And they're all going to think that she's somehow really rich. But she's not really rich. She's going to play that game. She wants to know what it's like to live in that other world. It's that question we have always at 3B. I wonder what it's like to live in that other world where people have stuff I don't have. Of course, there is a bit of irony. She goes to her friend, Madame Forestier. And Forestier, of course, is wealthy. Can I borrow for the night some of your jewelry? Well, yeah, I don't care. Here. Well, notice on page 336, hey, we're looking at genius. So watch. Everything Maupassant does is intentional. Take a look. She looks at Madame Forestier. At first, she can't find anything, and she says, do you have anything else? Read the words with me. Page 336. I have students that sometimes look at this and they're like, is this by design? Is he like intending to do this? She turns to Madame Forestier. She's looked at all of the other jewelry, and then she looks at her and she says, do you have anything else by chance? I'm sorry, by chance? The way that this story has everything to do with chance. In other words, what are the odds? I'm going to borrow a necklace. That necklace is going to get lost, and this is going to destroy my entire life. What are the odds of that happening? Well, I don't know. Do you believe in fate? Do you believe in chance? We're back to this question again. Of course, the day of the party arrives. She flees with her treasure, right? She has this overwhelming sense of desire, right? She's dancing, beautifully dancing, this victory of hers at the party. But notice Maupassant's not interested in the party. We have one paragraph about the party. And then on page 337, we're ready to be done. By the way, notice this is brilliant characterization. Where is the husband at 4 a.m. when the party's finally finished? He hasn't been dancing with her. He's been sleeping, right? And he's got to get up here in a couple of hours and go to work. Of course, she doesn't, I'm on page 338, she doesn't want to be seen with her coat on. And so she is willing to walk out in the cold so nobody sees her with her coat on, because her coat makes her look kind of lower class. On to page 339, right? It was all over. Everything's over. But the necklace is gone. And immediately notice that he is thunderstruck on page 339. What? It's impossible. It can't be over. It must be in the cab. Notice the exchange and the syntax. Notice the use of the dash. This is a 2B observation. No. What about you? Did you notice it? The questions, they're coming back and forth to each other. In other words, they're coming to a recognition of, oh no, we've lost the necklace. We're totally jacked. And Maupassant, in his syntax, is actually trying to capture that tension. Notice, she, while he's out looking, sits crushed on a chair, lifeless and blank. It's as if somehow she knows. Read the next line. I'm teaching you how to read close. Read the next line. I'm on page 339. Her husband returned at about 7 o'clock. He had found nothing. A few lines later, right? The appalling catastrophe, the utter hopelessness. Louis returned in the evening, his face lined and pale. He had learned nothing. In other words, this is the end. The end, right? But it's actually just the beginning. Why? Because now they got to do something. Question for your notes. Why don't they not just go to her and tell her? The answer? They're ashamed. Ashamed of what? They're going to have to admit the poor borrowed from the rich and then can't pay back to the rich. Of course, the concern here is, I got to save some pride. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to lose all hope, but go to work, right? Notice, aged 5 years, right? The husband ages 5 years in the moments following all of this, very quickly. Sick with worry, we're told on page 340. They got to go out and they borrow. He's compromising his career. Of course, she went to return the necklace, and the only thing Madame Forestier says is, you should have returned it earlier to me. The power of the rich, right? She was inconvenienced to loan this, if you will, right? Of course, the question is, what would she have said if she had opened up and seen that this was a different necklace? Would she have thought Louis a thief? This is an interesting question, right? Finally, the loathsome work. Let's put it in our notes. Let's pay attention to this for just a second. Her life is forever changed. Madame Louis has changed. Physically alters, jot down all the different changes. Financially changed, physically she looks different. She's not the sophisticated woman she thought she once was. Now she talks louder. Now she has to go to the shopping on her own. She had to get rid of her servant, right? For 10 years. Notice the change on page 341. Madame Louise looked old. Now she'd become the sort of strong woman, hard and coarse, that one finds in poor families, disheveled, her skirts askew, with reddened hands. She spoke in a loud voice, slopping water over the floors as she washed them. Characterization. In other words, this is telling us a lot about how she's changing. In just a couple of lines, she's no longer the person that she once was, right? But we're told, sometimes, and we're back to that image at the beginning of our story, sometimes we're told, when her husband was at the office, she would sit down by the window and muse over that party long ago when she'd been so beautiful, the belle of the ball. Look at the next line. This is, of course, the key line of the text on page 341. How would things have turned out if she hadn't lost the necklace? Who could tell? How strange and fickle life is. This, again, this word fickle. Chance, fate. How strange and fickle life is. How little it takes to make or break you. Even in translation out of the French, this is a brilliantly constructed story. The language is beautiful. How fickle life is. One minute you think everything is great. The next minute, everything is ruined. Of course, the conclusion of the woman, Madame Forestier, still young. I'm with you on page 341. Notice repetition. We point this out as good writers all the time. Notice the repetition of the word still. Still young, still beautiful, still charming, which is, of course, all intended to remind you. Remember, at level 2B, what is it and how does it work? Hey, there's repetition of the word still 3 times. Yeah, but how does it work? What is that still young, still beautiful, still charming trying to wow, for 10 years, right? Louise has been working hard to pay back, right? Madame Forestier has not been doing any of those. In other words, the cost of doing this is prodigious. And finally, hello. Notice she speaks to her in her first name. The woman's like, how dare you talk to me like that? You don't know who I am. You don't use familiar language. No, I'm your friend. Right? But her friend gives a little cry. Notice the use of the word poor. Now, I'm with you on 342. Oh, my Poor Mathilde, how you've changed. Yes, I've been through some pretty hard times since I saw you last. I've had plenty of trouble, and all because of you. Just fascinating. Which again begs the question, is it because of Madame Forestier? Or what we might say Madame Forestier represents? Excuse me. What does Madame Forestier represent? Well, she represents the upper class. She represents privilege. She represents all the things that, of course, Louise, and none of those things are hers, right? She says it. It's 10 years. I'm glad it's over. Of course, there's a proud joy when she says it, a simple joy. And then to be told, oh, no. It was only worth $100. You destroyed your life for nothing. Let's jump to 2A quickly. What is your favorite message theme here? Many freshmen have pointed out, man, this is a tragic story. You've given up your whole life, basically, for nothing. Or maybe a second observation. You know what? She learned something really important. So to that degree, it wasn't a waste of her life. She learned how other people live. She now has an appreciation of money she didn't have before. Of course, the third maybe message is fate, determinism. Is it the case that in life, some things just happen and there's no explanation and it's not fair at all? At level 2B, well, we've already commented on the brilliant characterization, the use of conflict, but let's just comment on the surprise ending. What does this surprise ending do to you? Well, it shocks you. Watch this, watch this. It shocks you the way she was shocked when she realized she didn't have that necklace on anymore. Right? In other words, in that moment, there's all this weight that comes to mind. Many freshmen have said, my first instinct when I read this last line was to kind of almost like laugh, like, stinks to be you. But then a level 3B reading of this poem, of this text says, well, yeah, but what about in your life? Are there